Recording pending. Okay. Recording. Okay. This is I was saying that this is the third time that I'm teaching this course, and based on the feedbacks we are getting from the previous students, we changed the project definition a little bit, and the course will be given by me, but the evaluation will be done by Adrian and partly together with me. For this course, you don't have any exam except the project that you should do. And what else? For this, I mean, the previous years, we had only one projects, and the evaluation will be done at the on the exam date. But this year, we decided to divide that project into other projects. I can share my screen and let you see what we have. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is the project, the first part of the project. And as you can see, the way that we will score the students is based on this. I think Adrian will join at 9 and he will explain more. But just to have a quick review on that, we have, you should do the first part of the project, and it's the deadline for the first part is 22nd of March. This would be before your holidays. And we think that in this way you will be forced to do the project when you have enough time, because we usually heard from the students that it would be great if we could do the projects when we have enough time for that, not to postpone it to the time that, I mean, to the days that we have other exams. So by this way, you will do the first part before the holidays, and this part is not really difficult. It's just the basic knowledge that you should know about C++, and we can review that. And for the second part, we didn't define any deadline yet, but it would be, I think, I don't know, it would be next to your other exams. But for the first part, the scores will be given out of 10, and for the second part, the score will be given out of 20. And your final score will be calculated by this. So the whole project should be done. So it means that even if you don't do the first part, in the second part you have to do it, because your score for the second part is calculated out of 20. But by doing just the first part, you can pass the exam. So if you just do the first part, and it will give you and you get 10 out of 10, and we will evaluate then again also in for the second part, because it is considered also as the second part for the people who will not do it in the first run. And let's review what we have. I actually made the project easier than simpler than the what we had in the past. I mean, in the previous years, I asked the students to generate the data themselves, but this year I don't want to ask them to do that. Ask you to do that. I will give you the data. So you should write for the first part of the project. It's just a console application. Today we will discuss what is a console application. You should just write a console application. That console application will be able to run two different commands. Those commands will be run by the user. And so what are those commands? We have two commands here, load and select. With load, the user can load all the files inside a folder and its subfolders. And so the plan is to load all the files from a folder and its subfolder and search among those files. The files are just some text files, and they follows a structure for their file names and also for their content. In the last year we had also some images, but this year I removed them. So you only have one text file. So when we run the program, you should let the user enter some commands. The first command is load folder path, and the second command is select and the condition expression. So for the condition expression, the user can enter something like this. The examples are here. For example, my data are located in this location, in this folder path. And I'm saying that load this folder for me, then select age int greater than 20. What does it mean? It means that give me the list of the files in which the age of the age attribute is bigger than 20, and do the comparison by considering that both the values, either the value that the user enters here and the value inside the file, is int or integer. This condition can, this expression can be greater than just one condition, like what you can see here. So here, if you look at that, we look at the file name, we have date, time, first name, last name, and height. And inside the file, we have date, time, first name, last name, height, gender, position, confidence. It can be more than this, and try to not to hard code this one, this one in your implementation, such that we can add any new data to your files, and your program can read all of them. But you should follow a structure. So you should know, for example, the second item in your text file is time. Or if you are going to add a new item here, you should know that, okay, the 9th item is age, for example. So you should have a structure defined by yourself. And when I ask you to load those files, you should extract all the contents of the files and their file names. And when I ask you to give me the list of the files that can satisfy this condition, then you will just go through those attributes of your files and give me the list of the files that these conditions are true for them. So you should, for this project, you should follow the object-oriented programming. We will teach you. I'm just giving you the because I usually hear from the student, it would be great if we have the project definition in the first lesson. So I'm explaining that such that you know many topics, but in fact you don't know some of these topics. But when you learn them, you can come back to this video and listen to that again to understand what I'm saying. So for now, you may it may not be very clear to you, but when you learn the course, then you come back, then you understand what I'm asking you to do. For example, here, when you get familiar with templates or template function, you will understand how can you implement this typecasting, because here I'm casting the data inside the file and also the value that the user entered. Or here I'm saying that the comparison should be done in a string. And the rest, what I can explain. Okay. As you can see, the project is not like a game. It's not very fancy, but the application itself is not very important. The thing that is really important is that you will use the C++ concept in your project. So what are the concepts that I expect you to consider, to use in the first part of the project? In the first part of the project, you can use recursive function. Where can you use that? You can use it for loading the files from the folders and its subfolders. File system, okay, working with the files and folders and the text files is like working with file system, but it's not just using them. We should use them in an excellent way. Parsing text. So you have here text in your text file. You have your comments are just some text expressions. You should be able to process them. The other one, memory allocation, avoiding unnecessary copies. So when you learn about pointers, so the folders, the data that I'm giving to you, I'm going to give to you, are very large. You cannot load all of them here. If you do that, you will get so much memory. What you can do here is to just load the file names, and when I ask you to extract the files, or when I ask you for some, for example, my query is on height, no, not on height, on position, for example, or on confidence, which you do not have it on your file name. In that case, you will also extract the file text, but you should have an object describing your files. So you have an object that describes your files. What does it mean? You have an object that has some attributes extracted from the file names and some attributes extracted from the file, the content of the file. And if I write a query like this, that I'm query on the attribute that doesn't exist on the file name, then you have to extract also the contents of the files. Because, you know, in this case, you will have more data to be stored in the memory. But I may do this, for example, I may ask you to do to run this query for the whole data, and the attribute doesn't exist in the file name, so you will extract all. But the problem is that if you extract them and keep all in your memory, you may have a memory problem. So you should be careful to just, for example, keep 50 of your data in the memory, and when you are going to extract the 16th one, you should erase the first one. So as long as you are running your program, only a limited number of the files, the content of the files should be in the memory, and the others should be released. So these are the things that you can do for memory allocation. For the templates, you obviously, for this part, you need to use template because template helps you to do one task for different data types. So the condition is similar. We are going to do the comparison either here if I put int or if I write a string. The comparison is similar, but the data type is different. So in that case, I can use templates. Handling pointers and memory. So you should be careful. You will not have memory leak. What does it mean? Memory leak means you are getting memory from your heap memory. We will explain this in the future. What is heap memory? What is stack memory? And the rest. You are getting memory from your heap memory, but you don't release them. And you don't have access to that memory anymore. In that case, you will have memory leak. Object-oriented programming, I already explained that. We need one object. We may need more, but at least we need one object explaining the files for us. We can name that object data package, for example. And that object will be a class, and that class will have some attributes and some methods, data members and some methods. Enumerator. So as you can see here, we have some numbers. So we can, and some names. We can define, I mean, there is a structure here. So that structure can be defined using an enumerator. You should work with a steel and probably Boost library. I'm not sure. It depends how we can, how much of the course can be covered by 22nd of March. I mean, our plan is to cover these concepts by the end of 5th or 6th lessons. In that case, you will have another 2 weeks, and during that 2 weeks, we will teach other concepts that you should use for the second part of the project. But at least you will learn all the things that you need to use for the first part by the end of 5th or 6th lesson. So code readability is very important for any programmer. So I'm defining here a style of programming for you that you can follow. You can follow other style, but I suggest you to follow this one. In this case, I can read your code easier because I'm familiar with this slide and I know that all the people are following that. What does it mean? Code readability is, I will explain it more again, but it's such that, for example, by the style that you are writing your program, I can understand if this is a method, if this method is public, or if it is a class. It's a protected, it's a data private attribute or public attribute. So I don't need to go to the definition of that thing to understand what is that that variable, that name. So I only need to read the name, and by reading that name, by your style of programming, I can understand that what does that name doing in this project. So for example, if I see a name that starts with a capital letter and I mean the second one also starts with a capital letter, then I can understand it's a public function. Or for the class name, you should follow this one. So this is the style that you should follow. Okay, my question is that, is this project definition 30% clear for you? Yes. So by the end of the lesson 5, come back to this video and listen to that again. And if you have any, because at that time you should understand this project definition by 100%. If you could not understand, then you have 2 more weeks to ask your question and deliver your project. So then we will have the class and you can ask your question for me. So this is the whole project definition. And if there is any question, you can ask now. If not, I can start the lesson. No question? Okay. Okay. Can you tell me what you can see here? You see the whole, your whole screen is my slide, or you can see also the notes and the right side of that? Because I have 2. You can see the notes? Okay, I think I can. Probably if I put this one here. Oh, how can I remove this? Maybe I need to change my share screen here. Stop sharing and share the second screen. I think now you cannot see the notes. Can you?
We can see the slide at full screen.
Okay, you can. The whole screen is the slide.
Correct.
Okay. So the things, the concepts that we will cover today are the things that you can see in this slide. But we may not be able to cover all the topics, but let's see what will happen. So first we'll discuss what is C++, what are C++ and object-oriented programming. We will write a small program to have hello world, similar to any other language. When you are learning a language, the first program that we will write is hello world. Then we will discuss about variables, constants, enumerated constants, expressions, if-else statements, conditional operators. I'm not sure about if we will have enough time to cover functions, recursive functions, loops, and switch case, but if we find, we will also discuss about them. What is C++? C++ is a programming language used to design complex and high-performance systems. So I forgot to ask you if you are familiar with C++ and other languages. Do we have any students here that know C++ well?
I know C++ very well.
Okay, very good. Let me see who was saying this. Okay, you were the one. Okay, so very good. We usually every year we have 1 or 2 students that are familiar with C++, and they usually also help other students during doing their project. So you can see from now your future to help other people. Okay, so for for C++, actually, I'm a professional C++ programmer. I was working 4 years as a C++ programmer in Iran in a company. And then when I started my PhD, I started to learn also Python because for your PhD, for doing research, we can say that Python is more important than C++ because Python is an easier language compared to C++, and people can implement their ideas very fast there, and you can find many public source codes for different papers on the internet in Python, but it's not really the case with C++. But actually, as a professional C++ programmer, I'm more into C++ than Python. But both languages are very great, and they both have usage in the industry and also in the research environment. What I want to say is that if you learn this course very well, you can easily find a job as a C++ programmer. But it depends on you that how much you want to learn. For example, you can just do the first part of the project, pass the exam, and by doing the first part of the project, I cannot say that you learn much. You learned much, but not as much as you can learn by doing the whole project. But I can understand you are, I think most of you are coming from electrical engineering major, and you may be more interested in doing some hardware things compared to C++. So C++ is a programming language used to design complex high-performance systems. It's an influential language. Java inherited much of its syntax from C++. Python interpreter, we have some Python interpreter that are implemented in C++. We have NumPy implemented mostly in C++, if you are familiar with Python. So it's a very important language and used in the industry, and you can find easily many job position as a C++ programmer on LinkedIn if you just Google now. So it's a high-level programming language, but compared to Python, it's less high level. So Python is easier than C++. It's a language that needs to be built. What does it mean? It means that we have two steps. We first compile our program to convert our source code to object code. And then we link our program to combine object code with libraries. So for the second part of the project, I will teach you to implement a DLL. The thing that I was explaining in the first part of the project will be in a dynamic link library, but not for the first part, only for the second part of your project. Then you will understand more when we need to combine those objects code to each other. You may see some links error. They are usually coming from, they come from when you have different libraries. Either you implement them or you are using different libraries from the internet, for example, Boost libraries or the others. Then the builder is trying to link them together. If you don't define their paths correctly, you may have some links error. But what is the difference between a language that first first compile and link the project, then run the program, and a language that only needs an interpreter, like Python? In Python, you don't need to build your program. You don't need to convert your source code to an object code and the rest. I mean, you don't need to to process the whole program together before running your program. in such languages, we only have one interpreter. That interpreter converts the program by taking a single line at a time. So if you have any experience with Python, in Python, you run your program and you will see one error only if you reach that line during the run of your program. So for example, if you have a program that is implemented by 1,000 line of codes and you have an error in the line 500, you will see that error only if your interpreter reaches that line. So you have to reach that line to see that error. But this can be a drawback of such languages, and C++ is not like that. So if you have an error in the line 500, before running your program, you can see that error when you are building your program. This is the difference between C++ and Python. So C++ needs to be built, but Python is an interpreter language, so it doesn't need to be built before running the program. C++ is a huge language that has undergone many revisions. And the most recent ones, I think it's C++ 20. We cannot cover all the different compilers that we have in C++, and probably we will use C++ 17 and 20. So feel free to use C++ 17 or 20. For example, if you use C++ 17, you do not have some functions, some classes that you can use for file system. And instead, you have to use Boost library, for example, to be able to process your file system. But if you use C++ 20, then you have those functions in the compiler itself. And so that will solve your problem. But it depends on you if you are familiar with C++ 17 and also Boost. You can use that one. If not, you can go for C++ 20. C++ and object-oriented programming. So object-oriented programming is very important. And it includes three main elements: encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. What are the meaning of them? Encapsulation. To explain encapsulation, I can give you an example. Imagine not imagine, all of you have a refrigerator in your home, and you know how to use your refrigerator, but you don't know how the refrigerator works. You may know because you are curious to know, but you don't need to know. You don't need to know how the refrigerator make your food, keep your food cold, and safe. The only thing that you know is that you should open the refrigerator and put your stuff inside that. And when you want to use them, you just open again the door and take it out. So this is the way that you are working with the refrigerator. Your classes, your objects also should be like that. The user or the user of your class should not know about the details of your implementation. The only thing that the user of your class or your objects should know is to know how to use your object. So you only share the things that user need to know to use the class, not the details of your implementation. The rest should be private to your object. So encapsulation is being a self-contained unit And users of a well-defined class do not need to know how the class works. They just need to know how to use it, as I explained just now. What is inheritance? I can also explain this by an example. So consider we have different car models from the same company. The new models have the same abilities, have some abilities from the previous models and some extra abilities. So in this case, the new models can inherit the similar abilities from the previous models and add some other features and other methods to their object. So by inheritance, we declare a new type that is an extension of an existing type. We will cover inheritance, classes, and the rest in the next lessons, in the coming lessons. But to know what is object-oriented programming, you should know what is encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. But it might not be 100% clear to you how to implement them, but it will be clear to you when we talk about them in more details later. What is polymorphism? So if you have different classes and they are inheriting from each other, you can have polymorphism. For example, you can have a parent class that is referring to a child class, or vice versa. So this is the way that you can work. You have one object that is saying that I'm a parent class, but in fact, the data inside that is a child class. Or the parent class can also refer to its class itself. So we have one variable that can refer of one variable of one type that can refer to multiple different types. And based on different types that it can behave differently. So this is polymorphism. If you are familiar with Python, in Python, we by its design, we have polymorphism, because in Python, we don't have for the built-in data types, we do not need to define a variable by setting the type of the variable. So if you have familiar with Python, you know that to define a variable or to define an object in Python, you only write, for example, a equals 2. And a can also, after that, we can just write a equals to Nastaran. Nastaran is just one string object. So here in Python, you have one variable that can refer to two different objects. And you can just, for example, you can have a list of different objects. So these are some examples of polymorphism that you can easily see that in Python wherever you go. But in C++, it's not like Python. You need to do some things extra to have polymorphism. But when we cover the inheritance, then you will also learn about polymorphism. You do not need to use. You don't need to use inheritance polymorphism in your first part of the project, but you surely need to use encapsulation and try to be careful to use that. But for the second part of the project, you should also cover use inheritance and polymorphism. Okay, to write a Hello World program in C++, we need to define to create a project. In this lesson, we are going to work with Visual Studio. and this is an IDE. What is an IDE? An IDE is a software that lets you to program in your language. Different IDEs that we have are, for example, a Visual Studio, Studio and Qt Creator, a PyCharm that you use, for example, for Python. These are different IDEs that you can use. You can write your program just inside a Notepad++, or if you are using a Linux PC, you can implement it in Vim or any text editors. But in this project, we are going to use Visual Studio because I found it easier for all people to work with. So let me show you how to work with Visual Studio. I think now you can see. Can you see my Visual Studio now?
Yes, we can. I have a question. Should we download Community, Professional, or Enterprise?
Let me see what I have, then I can tell you. I think I gave you the link, but I have the professional, yeah. I think the link that I gave you is professional because I put it on my Dropbox. Have you seen that? I mean, this one. Let me. Can you see my Teams now?
Yes, we can.
Can you see this one? I mean, I opened the Teams conversation, our group conversation. Can you?
Yes.
Okay. So here since it's very early, I forgot to explain something. So this is not this one, this one. Okay. Here, I gave you the software programs that you need to install for this course. For the people who needs to work with Mac, they need to install this one, and then install the Windows 10 on their PCs. And for the others, and also including people who have a Mac, you can go for this address to download Visual Studio 2017. And you can follow the instruction given here to install that. And then you need to install Qt. For your first part of the project, you don't need to install Qt, but for the second part of the project, you need this one as well because we will implement a GUI for your project. Because for the first part, you only need to write a console application. So you need to check this one to install whatever you need.
About those links, if I can ask a question.
Yes, sure.
How do you download the Qt? And also the second link, I think for me it said an error 404, page not found.
This one, I think this one, I checked this word.
Yeah, this is the other Qt that doesn't.
Okay, if this one, every year these are changing. So I will update this one. Just for this one, I will find it there and will share it with you.
Okay. And also, how do you download the Qt from the link that does work?
This one?
Yeah. If I click on it, nothing happens.
If you click on this, nothing happens?
No.
But it's getting downloaded here.
For me, it didn't work on Chrome, so I had to go on Edge.
Okay.
Okay. I'm using Mozilla now, so maybe you can also try.
I'm using Chrome. So yeah, I'll try with Edge.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there any other question about the things that I taught till here?
Yeah, I have a question for the last step where you have to add the Qt. Which map or path do we have to choose? Because I don't know. It says you can find I can't find blah 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 Q start or Q create or something.
You should consider, for example, when you are installing this one, it will ask you for some path. So
Yeah.
the path that you will install your project, for me, for example, I install it in this path.
Yeah.
You can see the path here. And then I add it here. So you should have a similar path depending on where you will install your Qt, and then you can add it here.
Okay, so it's a Qt 5.12. The path where it is installed, we have to choose.
Yes, yes. This
Okay.
path is I mean, this path will be chosen while you are installing Qt here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? No? Okay. Let me close this one and start from the very beginning, because I know some people have some difficulties with Visual Studio. Okay. So this is Visual Studio. If you install that, I don't know if you can see or not.
Yes, yeah.
You can? Okay. If you, sorry. Okay. So this, after your installation of Visual Studio, you will see something like this. You don't have this recent section, obviously, but you will have this one. So the first thing that you need to do is to create a console application and to be able to implement your program. Before I start, I should also add something, because I know some people are familiar, for example, with CMake, and they use CMake for to define their project or other different things. So here we are going to use Visual Studio to define the structure of our project. But I must say that there are other ways that are better than this. But I think if I want to cover those topics here, it would be difficult for you. So for your future, consider that Visual Studio is not the best option for creating a project. It's better to go for CMake and load the project that is created with CMake in Visual Studio or Qt Creator or the rest. I know recently also Visual Studio also let you create a project based on CMake, but we will not do it here because CMake is also like a small, short course. So it will be very difficult for you. We will only create a regular Visual Studio project. So you will come here, File, New, and then Project. From the things that you have here, I installed Qt here, so I have it here. I also have the other option. So I will go for you, it's probably similar this. I will go for Visual C++ and then this one and Windows Desktop and this one, Windows Desktop Wizard. You see here, there are different types. For your second project, you also need to create this one and this one. But for your first project, the only thing that you need to create is this one, Windows Desktop Wizard. You set a name for that. For example, we write hello, and you choose a path for that. Here, for example, I choose this path. I write hello, select folder, and the solution name is the file that gather all your files together. So if you open this solution file, you will see that the path to all your files is inside that. It's similar what you can do in CMake. But these are not very important for your, I'm just explaining this, are important, but not for your course. But if you are curious, just open the file that will be created with this name to see what exists inside that. But the file will be generated automatically using this, using Visual Studio. I press OK. From the options that I have here, I choose console application. If you need to define a dynamic library, you will go for this one. But for your first part of the project, you don't need. You just go for this one and press empty project. You, as a programmer, you should implement everything by yourself. You should not ask the Visual Studio to create the files that you need or implement the main function and the rest for you. Just select empty, it will be an empty project. You press OK. So as you can see, it's just an empty project. There are source files where you put your .cpp file and header files where you put your .h file. What are CPP and H file? CPP files are where you will implement your codes, and .h file are the location where you put the declaration of your objects and your function. So the declaration will be in the header files and the definition will be in source files. For the moment, we will only need to create one CPP file, which is the first file for every C++ program. Unlike in Python, here we need to have a special file whose name is main.cpp to let the compiler knows where to the location of the starting point. I mean, to let the compiler know the starting point for running the program. So we will only choose .cpp here from this section, and we do not change anything here, and then add. Again, this file is empty. What do I need to implement to be able to print a hello world on my screen? First, I need to include Iostream. What is Iostream? Iostream is a header file from the compiler in which the methods and the classes implemented, and we can use them to be able to work with our screen or with our files. For here, we are going to work with I/O, input and output. So we include Iostream here, and we write our main function. The simplest form of our main function is this. So now, this project, this is the first project that we can have. I mean, even if I don't write this one, by doing this, now I have a C++ programmer. I can even make it shorter and nothing. So this is just a C++ program. And if I want, I can just press Control F5. And you see the program has been built and then run. There you can see the output. Here, you can see here it's written, build started. So first the project will be built, and then the program will be run. So by just writing 2 words and this scope, I wrote a C++ program. This is the shortest program, simplest program that does nothing, but it's a C++ program that you can have. But usually we put int here. Why? Where we can use this value? Imagine you have a program that can be run. You create an exe file from that program, and you have another program. Also, you are implementing that, and you want to run that program that you implemented previously. So you have 2 programs. One of the program is going to use the other one. The program that is going to use the other one can use this value to see if the run of the second program was successful or not. So this is for that. For example, if you are going to pass some information to other programs that will run your program, that if your run was successful or not, or you want to pass some information to the other program, you can use this one. And using the functions that exist to run other programs, these values can be catched. So the good pattern is that even if you are not going to run your program from other programs, you should have your main function like this and return 0. So now I'm going to print something. To do so, I need to use a function. That function is defined in Iostream. So I should include that to be able to print that message. Cd cout. Cd end out. Okay. If I press, okay, tell me.
Could you make the font a little bit bigger, please?
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Is it clear now?
Yes, that's very clear. Thank you.
Okay. So by pressing Ctrl F5, I'm running the program. And as you can see here, the message is hello world. But let me explain what are these commands. Std and L puts one enter and after your message. So std cout lets me to print something on the string, on the screen. And by doing this, I can separate my variables, my messages. I can either write, for example, like this, hello world, or I can write it like this. Both will give me, if I run it, similar result. You can see this is similar to the previous one. But it's not good. I mean, the usage is not just for it's not for separating your message here. It's for printing multiple variables in one line or combining messages with some variables. Since you are not familiar with variables, I don't write an example here, but later on you will see some examples. And why I don't know, I can either write strndl here or put /n to have that enter after my message in this on the screen. But I don't do this because it's not a cross-platform thing. In Python, writing a /n is cross-platform. The interpreter, based on the operating system that will convert this to a new line. But in C++, it's not like that. In C++, instead, we have stdndl, which enter the character for new line depending on the operating system at the end of your message. So I mean, the enter code in a different operating system can be different from each other. And stdndl will write that code for us depending on the operating system and makes our code cross-platform. And if you don't know what cross-platform means, it means that your program can be run on different operating system without changing anything. So it can be run on any operating system. Let me explain how can you build your program, run your program, debug your program now. So we have here, as you notice, I press Ctrl F5 to run my program. But I can do some other things. When I press here, let me show you. This is the debug menu that you have. And let me see. I think Adrian is going to join. Waiting, I accept that, but he's still at meeting.
Do you hear me, people? Good morning.
Yes.
Okay, finally. I had some difficulties to join. I don't know why. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Adrian Munteanu. I'm your titular of this course. I'm not the one teaching it. Nastaran is the one who's going to teach it. So essentially, it's a 3 CTS course during which I want you to learn C and C++. It's a hands-on experience. So the 3 CTS are actually given fully for the project. I won't be asking theory. So essentially, you will not get questions on theory during the exam. The exam is an evaluation of your project. Compared to the past years, we decided to have a two-step process. That means half term, we are going to evaluate your progress in the project. And at the end, during the regular session, exam session, we are going to evaluate the second half. Why we do that and not like last year? Just to avoid what we observed past years, a concentration of effort towards the end of the semester. And this comes at a price. It comes at the price of frustration for some students. So I saw it happening. Now I want to avoid it. That's why we go for two-step evaluation. It's a hands-on experience. So you really need to be able to, after this, to program in C and C++. Now, it's not your first programming experience. You had programming before during the first 3 years of your bachelor. And it's not the last one either. You'll be programming also, for instance, if you follow electrical engineering, you'll be programming in Python and deep learning stuff, for instance. Voila, so this is the status. The project assignments have to happen as soon as possible. We already foresaw together with Nastaran a specific time frame when the projects will be given. Something that needs to be very clear from the beginning, you need to be as much as possible autonomous. So Nastaran will not be actually debugging your projects. So part of a project is to write it, to respect the syntax, to be able to compile, but also to design it properly. So in the design phase, she will help, but she will not debug your projects. So if you encounter project difficulties with debugging issues, then it's something to be fixed by you. Voila, so this is essentially the modus operandi, the way we are going to operate in this project, in this course. You will not see me except on the evaluation phases. I let Nastaran teach you. She's a professional programmer, and I think she already has experience in this course, and she does a very good job. There is also another change concerning the projects themselves. We are going to focus on one topic. We also decided with Nastaran to give extra credits, the highest marks for really exceptional projects. So you will get to pass if you have the minimum for passing, but you also can get a very high score if your project really exceeds the regular expectations, right? We had such projects in the past. I am someone who doesn't give 20s. The score of 20 is really very, very rare. I gave it to one former student for a project work. I don't know, must be like 5-6 years ago. That person, she's finishing now a PhD with me. And I also gave it last year to two brothers who made a really outstanding project in system programming. Both of them, they really got 20. So this is really exceptional. Should you have such a project, of course, you will get such scores. Voila. Now I let you ask questions. I'm here, so feel free to ask questions. And if not, yeah, go ahead.
Do we have to use Iostreams or can we use libfmt?
Once again?
Can we use libfmt? It's a better way to print stuff.
Yeah.
Why are you going to use that?
Because it's fun. It's neater. That's the only reason.
You can use.
I should check.
You can use standard printing. You want a specific library to print?
Yes, it's prettier. It's recommended at one of the CPP talks, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine. If you can justify, look, there is also maybe a philosophy of the project. Essentially, the project, you can build it in blocks, maybe in no time. If you have already programming experience or you are really doing C++ for fun, like these two guys who go to 20, they already knew everything about C++, or most of it. Then you know how to take bricks and libraries and classes and code to create your programs. Perfect, do it. But then, if I go in line 500 in your code in whatever function, you have to explain what that function does. And if you are not able to, then we have a big problem. So I very much appreciate the capability to use existing code. I also want to see code of yourself. So for instance, some of the principles implemented here, I would like that I see them implemented by yourselves. But if you are using pre-existing code, I let it happen, but then you need to be able to explain every line in the code and the principles behind, okay? That's something. This is how you program normally. You don't start creating the bricks. You start using the bricks, and the bricks were made by others, if you understand the parallel. Okay, that's something So related to your question, yeah, if you want to do that, do it. But then if I go into, that's a library. So basically it's pretty much done by others. It's like writing MATLAB. In MATLAB, you can also write the Fourier transform in one line. But in image processing, I ask the students to implement the Fourier transform by themselves. So it's different. Now, I'm not going to ask you to write a library for printing. It doesn't make sense. It's not a project for purpose. So you feel free to use it if you don't like the standard libraries. Other questions? Nothing else. Okay. Okay, but then I will let you, we will come back to practicalities for the projects and evaluations, midterm, later on. There will be actually one of the sessions we had foreseen, Nastaran, for the evaluations, right?
Yeah, I think it's 29th of March. I already explained this to them. I think you can also see that here. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Now I can see it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I said that the deadline is 22nd of March for sending the projects to me.
Yeah.
And and 29th of March, which is the lesson 8, we will evaluate the projects together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, the students should give a demo of their projects to us in different time slides. So
yeah, so for that evaluation, so you'll see me again there. For that evaluation, you have to also have a short presentation, a few slides to say what are the principles that you used and what were the libraries that you used. So if you want to have some libraries that you're using or yourself, feel free. It should not become also too simple, because essentially you can make with bricks, you can make the project maybe a few hundreds of lines, but then there's no purpose either. So then we have to go into the code. I will not be able to go in the code of libraries. That's why they are libraries. So anyway, try to find some balance between using existing things and your own things. So it's not the purpose of making of this a MATLAB either. That's also the idea of this course. I want to see that you are able to program in C++. That's the essence of it. Other questions? No other questions. So, okay, I'll let you continue. If you have questions for me, feel free to send me an email and I'll reply as soon as I can. Okay? I see lost faces or not being able to... Is teaching in English a problem? Is er een probleem met? Ik kan ook in het Nederlands praten, maar bij voorkeur voor mij het Engels is toch beter. Nastaran, she's following also Dutch classes, so try not to make jokes in Dutch because she will probably understand, but yeah. Okay. So should you have questions, feel free to contact me. Okay? Thank you very much, people. I let you continue.
Thank you, Adrian.
Bye-bye. See you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, I was explaining how to use how to run your program in Visual Studio, and so if you remember, I was using Control F5 to be able to run my program. It was when I wanted to use Control F5, but this one, Start Without Debugging. It's better to learn these short keys to be able to run your program. It's not really very interesting to use your mouse so often. We will use as a person, as people who born in the age of technology in the this recent years. So it's okay to use mouse, but it's better to learn also to your the short keys for running your program and debugging your program. So to debug your program, start debugging, you press F5. And to add some breakpoint, you can press F9, or you can put, for example, here, if I click here, it will give me one breakpoint. And if I press F5, it will first build the project. And then it will stay here and let me to debug my code. Here we don't have anything to debug. In fact, I mean, we do not have any variable, nothing. It's just a one message. But if you want to run your code line by line, you press F10. You can see that if I press F10, it will go to the next line. And again, F10 and F10 is over. But I can also put, for example, one breakpoint here and one breakpoint here. So the breakpoint here doesn't make sense to you because we don't have any large program. But in when you have a large program, then the breakpoint helps you a lot. So I press F5 to debug my code. And if I press F5 again, it will go to the next breakpoint. So it will pass over this one and go to the next breakpoint. If you have different functions, and if you do this, if you put a breakpoint inside a function, then it will go and it will jump into the function by that breakpoint to catch that breakpoint. You can also press F11 on top of, for example, you are running your program, debugging your program line by line by F10, and then you reach the you reach a line that is calling a function. To go inside that function, you have two different ways. Either you put a breakpoint inside that function and press F5 to jump into the function, or you can press F11 and then it will go inside that function. In Visual Studio, if you see the definition of, if you see the a variable defined somewhere, or a function that is called somewhere, you can press F12 to go to the definition of that function. And if you want to go to the declaration of that one, you can press Control F12. We have some other interesting tools here in Visual Studio, like attach to process. So for example, you have a project and you want to, it's a big, for example, you load a very large data, a big process is running in the background, and then you want to, okay, let me explain like this. You run your program with Control F5, but you want also to debug that while it's running. You want to also debug that. You can press attach to process and choose that process, that program from the list. I can also do it like now. And now you can see I can see the list of programs are running on my PC. If it was hello, okay, let's do it in real, then you will understand. I press Control F5 and it's running now. And I can, from this menu, I can use attach to process. And the process name is hello. Should be able to see that, but I cannot see. Because it's over, I think. It's not running. It's in debug console. Okay, if it was running in release mode and you were running your program, then because it was just one message and it was over, the run of program was over. But if it was still running, like you have a GUI and it's still running, then you can choose from that list that program to be able to debug that while it's running. You can also use, for example, Control Shift F9 to delete all the breakpoints. Like now, then it will delete all the breakpoints that you define. You can also, if you put some breakpoint here, you can also add some conditions, actions, or labels. For example, you have a variable here, and you want to catch this breakpoint if that variable equals to one number. Then instead of writing here if the variable, writing an if-else statement, you can just define a condition here to be able to catch that variable. You can also watch your variables if you define, if you define a variable here, let me just define int I equal to 10, and I put a breakpoint here. I can also put it here, F5, and if I press F10, you can see that here I have my variable, which doesn't have any value, and now I is 10. So watching the variable is very important while you are debugging your code. Instead of printing them, I saw many people just print some values, use print functions, cout functions to be able to see what is happening for you, to debug their code. But the way that you can debug is different. You can use in an IDE, you can use these tools to be able to watch your variables. I think okay, and the thing we have debug and release here. Release, if you go for release, it will give you, this is the project, the program that you will share with other people. You will release it, you will let other people use your program, so you should build your program in release mode. But if you want to just debug your code, you will use the debug mode. And the release mode is much faster than the debug mode, because it doesn't have many different tricks that we can use for debugging our application. These are for different systems, 64 bits address or 86. So these are different things that you can set. I think the most important things that you need to know about Visual Studio for this moment are given now. We can continue teaching the course. Okay, we have half an hour to cover some other topics. I forgot to explain something. Yeah. So as you can see here, I wrote include here, and I have one function here, which I said to you that this is a necessity. This is a necessity for you to have such function for a C++ program. You can see the function is defined using these two braces, and this will give you one scope. Okay, this is a local scope for your main function. What we have here is the global scope. Whatever I write here can be used in other function because it's the global scope. For example, if I define a variable here, int id equal 20, I can have access to this one, print id, for example. I can see this one because it's defined as a global variable, but this is not recommended at all, because you cannot keep the track of changes that can happen to this global variable, because it can be used from any functions defined here, any classes, because it can be used globally. So we don't do this. But something else I need to tell you, as you can see here, I'm writing std before every function. I can write, for example, using namespace std and then delete this one. I don't have, I mean, if I do this, I don't need to write std anymore. But I don't recommend this at all. Because the problem, for example, let me first say, if I write like this, I don't know this project, where this project is coming from. I don't know if cout is coming from std or not. Okay, if I keep my mouse here, it will not show it now. If I press, for example, F12, it will goes here, then I can understand, okay, it's coming from STL library, Iostream, as you can see. Or if I keep my mouse here, I can see it comes from std, Iostream. But this is something that Visual Studio lets you to know. I mean, these are some tools that Visual Studio helping you to understand your code. But sometimes you want to just open your files in Notepad, in just a text editor. Then there you don't have these abilities. You cannot press, for example, F12 to go to the function. These are the tools that Visual Studio providing for you. So as I said when I was explaining the project definition, I said to you that you should have a coding style using which I can understand your code. I don't need to check the definition of that to be able to understand. So if I write std here, the first advantage is that I know that where it comes from. And it also decreases the ambiguity. For example, here I can define a namespace. VUB. This is defining a local space inside the global space. So VUB, and I'm defining int I equals to 20. Okay, and std I. So if I now run this program, it should print 10 here for me. This is a short program. I know that, okay, by calling this one, I'm calling this, not this one. But sometimes in a long program, we may lose the track of our code, and we may think that, okay, we don't know this one is defined, and we may think that using and if I run this one, it is still working with this. Even if I wrote VUB using namespace VUB, it's trying to use the local one. But why I should bring up this ambiguity for my code? That I don't know from where it's coming, and I should think with myself, okay, this is local, I should find this one, maybe this one, maybe we have a function which is 50 line. And in the first line, this is written, And in the line 49, this one is written, and the line 50, this one is written. So I expect that as a programmer, I expect that, okay, I will be called from VUB. But since in the first line of the function, this one is written, I will be called from here. So that's why I say that don't write this, especially in the long environment. Only in the short function, it's good to use this using namespace. Otherwise, don't do that. And write here, cd, and also here, if you want to use VUB, the function from there, I mean the variable from that namespace, just write VUBI. So in that case, since I'm following this habit of writing the namespace of a variable or a function or a class before the name of those variable or functions, I know I is coming from here, and I am sure that it's coming from there. And even if I open this main.cpp file, let me just open it. Open containing folder, Ctrl S. If I open it here in a Notepad++, I can see that I is coming from VUB. I do not have, for example, here F12 and the rest to find where it comes from. But from what is written here, I can understand where it comes from. Okay, so namespace are defining some scopes for us. To access the items defined inside that namespace, we use the name of that before the name before that. Also here, this is the case with all the libraries that we are using. The other thing that I should add is that when you write include Iostream here, all the things that is implemented in Iostream will be copied here when your program will be compiled. You don't see that, but in your object files, those codes will be written here. Why I'm saying this, because in the future, when you are including your own file, you should know that you should not duplicate this. And to avoid these duplications, you have some tools to avoid that, but you should also be aware that not to duplicate them. So if you write, for example, in your you have defined a class, the declaration in an H file, the definition in a CPP file. If you include Iostream in the declaration file, which is the .h file, don't include it again in your .cpp file. Why? Because in your .cpp file, you are already included your .h file in which include Iostream has been included. So don't try to understand where you really need to include something and where you don't need to include something. But we also, to avoid these duplications, we also have some tools that I will explain later, like Pragma ones, if you are familiar with, or some macros that can be defined. But we will discuss about that later in next lessons. Okay, I think I explained the things that you need to know to write a C++ program, simple C++ program. Okay, let's continue. Is it clear everything to you till now? Yes? Okay.
I have a question. Can we get the data sheet, not the data sheet, the data set and the slides on Canvas so that we can implement it if we already know for a lot about C++, because it doesn't go really fast, the lessons.
On Canvas, I'm not familiar with Canvas, but I created a, Google website and also a Teams group for you. So I think if I stop, when we leave the meeting, the recording will be ready and will be added to our group automatically. But since it will be only available for 7 weeks, sorry, for 7 days, I guess, I will also upload it on a Google website that I can show it to you. I did it for my Python course. This is, for example, for my Python course that I given in this year. The video is here and the slides are next to that. You can download also the slides, and you can also watch the video. For C++ course, all the slides are already uploaded, but there is no video for that because last year the classes are given in person. So this year I will also add the videos to them, and you can use that. For the data, I should see if I can put it on my Google Drive, then if so, I will put the link also here. If not, I should put it somewhere else. But I'm not really familiar with Canvas, and we usually have some difficulties working with that. Is it okay?
Certainly, thank you.
Okay. Data. I think I will upload the data in this week for you. So the rest. How much time we have? 20 minutes. So we have learned how to build a C++ program and run it, and to see the errors. Why I forgot to say this? Okay, let me also test. So for building the program, you can see the error list here and also output here. So I recommend you to use this part, output, because error list is the list that is processed by Visual Studio. But the output here is the thing that you can see from your compiler. This is the message that your compiler is producing for you. And error list is created from this message. So it's better to get familiar with the compiler output, because it's not necessary for you to use, for this course, it's necessary for you to use Visual Studio, but for implementing your projects in the future, you should not limit yourself to only use Visual Studio. So in that case, it's better to get familiar with a compiler output. Here it will show you the error thanks to Visual Studio. If you double click on that error message, it goes to that line and you will see the error. So I think that was the last thing that I wanted to say. I hope we can continue now. So we learned how to implement a C++ program, and what are different parts, the scopes, the main function, the global scope, and the rest. Let's get familiar with variables. A variable is a place to store information, a location in your computer's memory in which you can store a value and from which you can later retrieve that value. When you exit your program or turn off the computer, the information is invariable is lost. So keep this in your mind, that all the variables, their information will be lost if you exit your program, or if you go outside of the scope of that variable, even if that variable is a pointer referring to another memory. So the variable itself, the data inside that variable will be gone. So that's the reason sometimes we have memory leak. When that variable is referring to a pointer, when that variable is a pointer and pointing to a memory, to our heap memory. I'm just giving you this hint now because in the future we will go in depth, and you should know that variables, the data inside the variables will be gone, even if they are pointers. The thing that will stay in your memory is not coming from stack memory. All the variables defined in the stack memory will be gone. So permanent storage are a a database or a file on disk. And we have also heap memory, which is not a permanent storage, but is not also a stacked memory. And there we may have some difficulties. We will cover these topics later on, but just keep this in your mind that the variables, when you turn off your computer or if you go out of the scope of that variable, will be lost because they are defined in the stack memory. So permanent storage is either a database or a file on disk. Primitive data types, int, character, boolean, float, double, void. We have seen void and for main, and if we write it, the function will be similar to a procedure that doesn't have any output, and we don't need to return anything. Data type modifiers are signed, unsigned, short, and long. So we can add these data modifiers before this to define a new data type. Depending on your system, all these data types gets different amounts of memory. So for example, on a 64 bits data set, we can have these sizes. These are different again with Python. If you are familiar with Python, there we do not need to define these things. And the memory grows as much as you need. But here, the memory is defined, is allocated based on the variable types. And you may have some underflow or overflows here if you don't consider the amounts of data that can be stored in that variable. I ran this program. I wrote using std here because it's just a small function, so it's okay for this one. But for a large function, it's not really okay. For example, I could just write this using std out here, and then all the functions, all the classes don't need to write std anywhere. So don't do that. I'm writing the size of the int on my PC, and the output was like this. So on different PC, these outputs are different from each other. To define a variable, to define a variable, we first write the type of that and the variable name. We can initialize it to some value and comma variable name, and again. So we can define multiple variables in one line. We can initialize that or not, and I recommend you to initialize your variables to avoid any ambiguity and any bugs in the future. And the naming style is better to be like this. It's case sensitive, and you cannot use keywords to define a variable. For example, you cannot write type 4. 4 is a keyword, so you cannot use it to define a variable. You can define a data type for yourself. So using the different data types, you can define a new data type, onsite short int, and set a name to that. So type def is saying that from this moment onward, if I wrote ushort, you should just replace ushort with onsite short int. It's a message to the compiler that the compiler knows that ushort means onsite short int. So this is another thing that you can do. And you can use it to define a variable. What else we can do for define a variable? Instead of writing the type here, I can write auto, which is a really good way of defining variables. The type of the variable that is being declared will be automatically deduced from its initializer. So if I write auto age 20, based on this, compiler will understand this age should be integer value. And if I put, for example, 20.0, the compiler will replace the type of age with double. So the type of the variable is defined from the initializer using the compiler. Auto, the return, can be also used as the return type of a function. The return type will be deduced from its return statements. This is a function. You just saw a function which was main function, and auto, I can write auto here, and based on this statement, the type is defined. So the type of here will be int. The compiler, when is translating our high-level implemented program to a language of machine, will replace auto with int. Constants. Constants are data storage location, and they remain constants. You must initialize a constant when you create it, and you cannot assign a new value later. The absolute manner which you should not use it is this one. You can define a macro and using some macros that I'm saying students per class is 15. So whenever I use this one, the compiler will replace it with 15. But the best way is const int age 20. So this value cannot be, this is like a variable, but the value cannot be changed. Enumerated constants. We have plain enums and enum classes. Enum classes are more recommended, are better than plain enums. Why? Plain enums, their enumerator names are in the same scope as the enum, and their values implicitly convert to integer and other data types. So you can define plain enum, color, and the values. You can also assign some value. For example, if I don't assign anything, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But here I'm saying that the first one should be 100. So the second one will be 101. And I'm saying green should be 500. And this one will be 501. So you can also change their values by setting some value to these constants. But enum classes can be defined like this: enum, class, and the rest. So it's similar to this one. The only difference is that we have the keyword class here. Enumerator names are local to the enum and their values. To their enum and their values do not implicitly convert to other types like another enum or int. So these are local to this color class, these enumerator names. Let's see one example. The example that we have here is that we are saying enum season. This is an enum, plain enum with 4 different enumerator names. I'm creating a variable of this enum, and I'm setting that, initializing that to winter. I'm saying if S is not equal to spring and S is not 4, so I can compare S with other data types like integer, even if it's not an enumerator name. It can be done. But here I'm defining an enum class. And to define a variable of this one and initialize it to something, I have to use the name of the class before that. And from the things that you just learned, it is really good to use these names before that because of 2 reasons. First, we know that where it comes from if you read the code. Second, it will decrease the ambiguity and unwanted behavior. So that's why we prefer enum class to plain enum. If I want to compare them, again, I have to write these here. And if I to compare it with an integer number, I have to cast it. It will not be casted implicitly like this one. And if I want to print it again, I have to cast it again to convert it to a data type that can be printed. So enum classes should be preferred because they cause fewer surprises that could potentially lead to bugs. What time is it?
I have a little question. So for the seasons, you say if S is not equal to 4, but there is no 5th season. So what does that 4 stand for?
That was a really good question. I think it's 0, 1, and 4. It doesn't have. I think it will not convert. It will convert S to an integer number. And then since S is winter is 3, so this condition is true. So 4 will not be cast here. S will be cast, I guess. But you can run this code and to see what will happen. So, but that was a really good question here. But here, since we need to do a cast, it will throw an error. So you will understand. But here you will not see. You will not have any error. But you can also try run it in at home to see what you can have. It might be different from some compiler to some other compilers, but I think what will happen is this.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think we do not have to start these expressions things. We will discuss about that later in in the next lesson. So if there is any question, you can ask. Otherwise, I think the class for today is over. No question? Are everything clear to you? Okay. So I will, this week I will upload the data for you for the people who are familiar with C++ programming. They can already start that, but just keep in your mind that you should use all the topics. If you are using some other libraries, you should justify why you are using, not just for making simpler. So because, for example, for implementing this thing, you can use Bootstrap, which makes it very simple, but then you will not be able to use the other things that you can use because you made implementation of their program very easy for yourself. So try to keep in your mind that you should implement your program such that you can use this concept, get familiar with these topics to show that you learn these things. But you can start from now if you already familiar with. So if there is no question, we can say goodbye and go and have a rest because it was very early. I hope you don't have any other class now.
Well, we do actually. So.
Oh, okay. But if you find any other time that suits you best, please let me know.
I will check with the other groups and see if there are any matches.
Okay. Okay. Have a nice day, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.